The Gentle Rebel Podcast.
For introverts, highly sensitive people, and creative misfits.
Hello, and welcome to the Gentle Rebel Podcast. My name is Andy Mort, and this is a weekly show committed to help unite your inner stoic, your quiet sensitivity, and well, that's about it. So that you can design a rewarding, creative life and change the world from the inside out without getting too overwhelmed and burned out and that sort of stuff. I hope you're doing okay. That was a shocking introduction to the podcast. Oh well, I'm going to keep it. I'm nearly back to an even podcasting keel. I've been writing a lot more consistently and with a little bit more energy, I think, this past week or so. So feeling pretty good about that. I've finally got to formulating my thoughts on the recent trip that I took to Finland for the HSP Gathering in Oulu. So we're on the right path, I would suggest. But yeah, so before we get into all of that, this.
It's pretty weird and old school when you're listening to a show. Enjoy a great discussion when the speaker needs to go and interrupt you with an advert for a razor or a fence, a mattress jacket or a cheap online colonic cleanse.
You're right, just quickly, I don't do adverts on the Gentle Rebel podcast, so I decided in order to keep it free of those kinds of interruptions and to find a way to sustain its continued creation, you can become a supporting member through Patreon. You give a small monthly donation of $1 or more directly to contribute to making these episodes happen. In return for your generosity, you get all sorts of exclusive bonus resources aimed at helping introverts and highly sensitive gentle rebels survive and thrive in all areas of your life. Just go to andymort.com/Patreon. Even the smallest contribution makes the biggest difference. And if you become a sustaining member, no matter which tier you subscribe at, then I will read your name out in the next episode and thank you personally, just like I'm about to do right now. Wait. Before you do that, could I just point out that for someone who says he doesn't do adverts on this podcast, this sounds remarkably a lot like an advert. Oh, really? Yes. Oh, sorry. No worries. Tula. Oh, Tula, amazing Auntie Tula. You are a Patreon, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you aboard. Thank you so much for joining. So very nice to see your face up on that little newsfeed notification that I got when you joined there. If you want to have your name read out in a future episode, then all you have to do is become a Patreon supporter. Go to andymort.com/Patreon. It's Patreon, as was made clear in that little jingle. Just quickly, while I'm talking about Patreon, I want to share a clip from this week's Stoic Sanctuary feature. Now, if you join at the $3 a month tier, then you get these Stoic Sanctuaries, these little reflections, these meditation thoughts most weeks, or essentially the aim is whenever I record a podcast, I record one of these little Stoic Sanctuary episode things as well, which is a thought related to some Stoic teaching or quote to help encourage you in your quest for the good life in the modern world. So this is a clip from that, just to give you a sense of what that is all about. Sorry, I just edited that together and it didn't sound right, so I'm just going to put a little keyboard thing just between me speaking now and the Stoic Sanctuary clip, because that might make it just sound a little bit less like I'm still talking. What Seneca is really saying here is that our minds can prevent us from seeing how rich we really are, and that you will always be poor if you're craving more. For the person who spends their life craving and lusting over things that they don't have will never be satisfied with anything that they do acquire. Seneca says, no person has the power to have everything they want, but it's in their power not to want what they don't have and to cheerfully put to good use what they do have. Our lives are cluttered with stuff that we don't really need, things that don't add value to them, and things that distract us from the stuff that really does add value. The more stuff we have, the more we believe that more stuff will fill that desire within us to find happiness. Craving more is a cycle of emptiness, especially in a world where you can access anything that you can afford instantly. That was from this week's Stoic Sanctuary on the subject of craving. I've also just published a Gentle Rebel Insider One sheet, which is a graphic page of thoughts about something that has been influencing me in a big way over the previous month or so. This month is on the subject of minimalism. You can probably see the links across things there. Sign up at the $10 a month tier to find out why minimalism has been impacting me in a big way, and to see the sheet of takeaways and thoughts on why I think it has so much to speak to all of us, especially as highly sensitive people and as introverts and gentle rebels in our noisy world of stuff, of not enoughism, and of fear that just keeps us anchored to lives that we don't necessarily want to kind of be living in that way.
I'm like butter from the fridge, I'm pretty hard to spread. I'm not like margarine, which will spread thinly on your bread. I'm lumpy when you meet me, but give me a little time. It'll be worth the wait when you see what's on my mind. See what's on my mind. See what's on my mind. It'll be worth the wait when you see what's on my mind.
Okay, I think I'm getting a little lost here. This is good. So, let's get into the meat of this week's episode, and I want to reflect on some of the stuff that I learned, that I enjoyed, that I was challenged by, and all that sort of stuff by my recent trip to share workshops and perform. A little gig at the HSP Gathering in Oulu in Finland. Flew out on the 10th of August of this year, 2018. Gathering happened on the 11th, and I flew back on the 12th. So it was a proper flying visit, so to speak. But it was also one of those trips that felt like I'd been gone for longer, because it was one of those experiences that stretched my comfort zone and it was so full of that, good feeling of adventure. And by the time I got home, it was like I've packed kind of a week's worth of living into 2 days. It was my first time at any kind of highly sensitive person HSP event. Room of nearly 100 people. I think it was 90 odd people who were there, who kind of resonate with the heart of what it means to be highly sensitive. And it was a beautiful thing. And the first thing that I was really struck by was this kind of lack of judgment of awkwardness and of, people sitting alone. There was this kind of acceptance of people just being who they are, being where they want to be, occupying spaces in the way that they want to occupy them. I don't know if you've ever had that thing where you go to kind of a big event, or, I think of like going to, if you've ever been to like a wedding on your own, for example, and you feel really self-conscious and paranoid, like you should be kind of making an effort to mix with people, that everybody else is doing that, and if you're stood there on your own, people are thinking like, oh, what's the matter with him? And or come on, you need to be throwing yourself into the spirit of the day, or whatever it might be. And that thought process can spiral. Their fear can increase as a result of like feeling, you feel more and more like an imposter, and it can just kind of perpetuate itself. Well, this was not the feeling that I got at the gathering. Wait a sec. I'm not sure I want to use the word gathering. Actually, when I just said it, it felt a bit sort of cultish. Just to make clear, there was nothing cultish about this event. Event might be a better word. The event. Man. Stick a "the" before event, and that sounds even more cultish somehow. I don't care. Do you know what? I'm going to call it the happening. I mean, out of all three of those words, that probably sounds the most cultish, but it also feels the most appropriate. Happenings that seem to be a big part of Finnish life, art and music and food, festivals, all this sort of stuff that comes to life in the summer in Finland. I was learning that the people that I was with were talking about this kind of this almost bipolar personality of the Finnish nation, with the winter versus the coming to life through the spring and into the summer. And from what I understand about the origin of happenings as a concept, which I think sort of started emerging in the mid-20th century, they're about sort of collective experience of creativity, not simply some kind of performance or event to be consumed. I think they're about a bit of spontaneity and a bit of collective creation. I don't know. I'm really talking out of ignorance here, but anyway, I might refer to it as the happening anyway. So I'm just going to spend the rest of this episode talking about some of the kind of, I guess, key pithy takeaways, the reminders, things I've learned from my trip. So the first thing was that it's quite important to say yes to stuff that gives you an initial buzz. So what I mean by that is, those times where you're kind of presented with an opportunity to do something that feels unique and special. What do you do in the face of that? How do you react? I find this quite an interesting thing to observe within myself. And although it's certainly still a work in progress, it probably will be forever, in fact. I'm getting better at recognizing this thing and saying yes before the fear kicks in. Because that fear, I can rest assured that fear is going to kick in at some point, and my mind's going to be telling me with all it possesses that I need to run away and actually pull out of this thing that I've said yes to. And this is exactly what happened when I had the initial email from Tula, seeing whether I'd be interested in coming to Finland for the happening. When I first read the invitation, I was like, wow, that's absolutely, once in a lifetime, amazing, exciting prospect. And had that, I just thought, I've got to put everything into making this happen. But on several occasions, between saying yes, between having that moment of, my heart being like, whoop, yep, this is something you got to do, mate. And then between the saying yes and the happening itself, which was near enough a year, I think, my head fear tried derailing me and talking me out of going several times. And believe me, that voice is strong. I came close to making up some excuse on a few occasions. But over time, I've also developed, in kind of parallel to that fear voice, this kind of counter voice which gathers evidence and actually kind of is a little bit more rational and speaks truth into stuff like that. I bet you can think of experiences similar to this when you've maybe been faced with the opportunity or the chance to do something or go somewhere that is going to be an amazing experience, or it's going to feed some grander vision that you have, or it's just going to be really good for you in some way. But it's also going to require you to take a big step outside of your comfort zone. Dwell in the initial buzz of your heart. Remember that reaction that you had, that feeling of, wow, that's amazing, before kind of reality sets in, before that voice of like, yeah, let's be realistic here. Come on, rein yourself back in. Like, just dwell in that and back it, because you'll be so glad you did. Down the line. The second thing that I've learned is that you can regulate and manage energy on the go. I also learned, that travel doesn't have to be exhausting. And when you're traveling alone, you have kind of a bit more control over things, even though there's different challenges. Obviously, there's different challenges of traveling alone. But you've got the opportunity to regulate and to manage your energy as you go on your own terms. But it does require some intentionality. To, I guess, think of it like treating yourself like a friend or a kind of guest that you're looking after. Ask what is needed to put this person, at ease as you go about the trip. Maybe you require more knowledge about where you're going, what to expect at different points in the journey, what to expect, when you're there, all that sort of stuff. Make a plan. Ensure that it's full of moments of respite along the way so that you can relax throughout the process, and that you're going to have your needs met, things like food and rest and coffee was a big thing for me. Like I'd planned out, right, at this, because I was traveling for a significant portion of Friday and then Sunday. And I was like, this is going to be where I'll get my coffee. And I'm going to do it in this place. I did some research about where I'd be going through. And, you can sort of manage things to put yourself in non-stressful environments along the way. And for me, planning means that I don't have to be thinking and worrying about, right, what's next? How am I going to do these things and meet these needs that I need to get met? Because I know when the time is going to be for each thing. If things work out okay. Obviously, things don't always work out as planned, as I actually experienced, because flights were late and the connection time between Helsinki and Oulu shrunk drastically on the way back. It was a quick run across the entire Helsinki airport. But, I hadn't really planned a whole lot at that point anyway, so it was okay. But yeah, if you can identify the sources of anxiety, then you can do something to alleviate that anxiety and remind yourself that you've done everything in your power to do so, and that actually worrying about it is not going to enhance the situation, that you've got everything covered that you have at your disposal within your own influence. The third thing is the next thing will wait for you. One of the things about travel that will never cease to fascinate, to amaze, to bemuse me is people's impatience. But it's also always a good opportunity to look in the mirror to assess my own impatience, my own restlessness as I go about my life. And my favourite moment of people watching, because I do enjoy people watching, and my favourite moment when it came to this sort of impatience was at Helsinki Airport. We had to hop on a bus to get from the terminal building to the plane. And there was a moment where the pushing and the gathering at the door of the building, the terminal building, was funny, enough. Especially I was thinking, like, I mean, they haven't really thought ahead here, because the first people onto the bus are going to be the last people off the bus, because you're going to have to, get on through the door and move as far away from the door as you can so that everybody can fit on. So you're basically you're putting yourself the last on the plane. But anyway, there were two buses. I was on the first one. Yes, I won. I got there. And as I got off the bus, I was standing in the queue waiting to go up the stairs and embark onto the plane. And that's when the second bus arrived. And so I was stood at the back of the queue to get on the front of the plane. This is a really dull story so far. But as this second bus, the doors opened, this man literally, like he kind of stumbled off and ran up behind me and got so close behind me that I was like, what is going on? Because I was just sort of stood around daydreaming, thinking about, airports and just having a look around. And yeah, he'd run up behind me and stood in the queue to beat other people from getting there. And he was literally panting, like, and stood really, really close to me. I was baffled. I mean, like, what? Why? I mean, if you are that man and you're listening for some bizarre reason, or if you kind of do this yourself, then I'd actually love to hear from you. Just let me know. I'm genuinely interested in why that might have happened. Because, the sooner you get on, the longer you're going to have to wait while you're on there. And then you're stuck in like this tin can with loads of people for longer. But I don't know.
If I can hear you breathing, if I can hear you swallowing, well, that means you're too close to me. If I can see Twitter on your phone and everyone you're following, yeah, that means you're too close to me. Please don't be in my personal space. You don't have to be so close that I can smell your face. You really don't have to stand that close to me. I can still hear you when you speak if you're within 100 feet of me.
I just came to the shop to buy some bits for tea. I fill my basket and I'm standing in line thinking about what I watch on TV.
When I get home,
and here you are, you're breath on my neck, standing so close to me. Why are you there, breathing down my neck? Seriously?
No, seriously, what's wrong with you? Step back, give me some space, for goodness sake!
Right, where was I? Oh yeah, rushing, impatience, that kind of thing. Well, this is interesting. I said that I like how it kind of holds a mirror up to me and my own mindset. And I had several moments through the weekend where I reminded myself to be present, to kind of experience this being here, right here in this moment. You know, meeting Nanti, finally meeting the mighty Tula, who has come up several times in this episode. And she's been a friend through the stuff that I do online here for many years, through the Haven and all of that. There was the moment driving through Oulu, going out for a meal at a genuine happening on the Friday night, seeing the sights, you know, watching the amazing guitarist Arja Ludinen, and her band with Mika on the Saturday. I'm sorry if I've completely butchered that pronunciation. I probably have, but maybe I have. And then sitting in the sauna with the other Mika on Sunday before I got my flight home. There were moments where my instinct is often to think, what's next after this? And to be completely, in the future, and to be, well, let's get this done and then we'll do the next thing. But instead I chose to remind myself that this is soon going to become a memory. These are moments that I won't experience again, and I need to turn them into the best memories they can possibly be by giving the most of myself to them. And the sauna was a bit of a moment for me as well. As a Brit, we tend to be a little bit kind of coy about wandering around naked very often. So the moment I realised, right, this is not so much of a problem here in Finland, as it wasn't in Germany when we went to Berlin. And I was faced with this hurdle to jump over. When I was like, okay, everyone's naked around here. I had to borrow these budgie smugglers, which itself was a little bit sort of like pride denting, but I got on with it. And there was this moment I was like, screw it, I'm here. I'm giving myself fully to this because I know that this is going to be something that I remember, and it's something that will be, I will hold quite dear in my memory in the future. And so, again, I'm so glad that I did it. It was, I suppose I could describe it as liberating and inwardly pretty amusing for me as well, and something that I do treasure as a memory. One of the biggest takeaways from the happening came from what could have actually felt like quite an alienating part of the experience, which was the language barrier. But I found something really quite beautiful in it, of being somewhere where I didn't understand what was being said at all. And I've spoken before about how I love listening to people speaking languages that I don't understand. I love listening to conversations and seeing people communicating, understanding one another when I have absolutely no clue what is being said. I think there's something quite musical about it. There's something really quite enchanting about it as well, because like a foreign language that you don't understand just sounds like gobbledygook. Basically, it just sounds like it's just how can anyone else possibly understand this? And so to see people engaging with one another in a really meaningful way I find a really beautiful thing. And so, a lot of my trip was underpinned by that experience, which might sound completely horrific to you, but I kind of really enjoyed it and had some fun with it as well, when sort of getting up on stage, being asked questions in Finnish, or having Jana, who was my interpreter for the day, and she was amazing. She helped massively. But there were moments where she was interpreting what I'd said from the stage and talking to people, and it was, I don't know, I enjoyed having a little bit of fun around that. But people's English is phenomenal anyway when speaking to me and understanding what I was saying. So it wasn't full on needing translation, and I suppose it wasn't a full experience of being unable to communicate either. So, in fact, it did feel a little shameful how much I relied on, I suppose, Finland's education system, and the fact that English is embarrassingly broadly spoken, and I'm really not good at other languages, which is something that I do feel a niggle of shame about. But another aspect of this that struck me was how connected I felt to everybody in that room, even though I couldn't understand what was being said. There was some far deeper connections and bonds going on between us. The language of heart and soul, I suppose, felt really palpable. I know that sounds kind of twee, but it's the best that I can describe it. There was an openness of people to one another and to me that just felt so welcoming and spacious, full of space. And so I guess this lesson is that it's good to feel on the outside when it comes to language at times, but because it kind of strips away everything that you take for granted, and it shows you something, forces you to go somewhere deeper, to transcend our ability to understand through words, through all the kind of rich plethora of words that we have in our own languages, but to go somewhere deeper that bonds us together as human beings. Fifth thing that I took away from the trip, literally a physical thing that I took away, was the book of Finnish Nightmares. Tula again gave me this wonderful gift when we met up on the Sunday morning, which was Finnish Nightmares, a different kind of social guide to Finland. It could be called, Andy's Nightmares, to be fair. Within it, I've learned that I must be at least a little bit Finnish somewhere in my lineage, because the little cartoons describe my own thought processes, anxieties, experiences of life to a T. It's hilarious. And if you get a chance to check it out, then I highly recommend you do, because you'll probably recognize yourself in there as well and think, maybe I'm a little bit Finnish. The sixth thing I've learned is that it's really special when you meet someone in person who you've only known through a screen. And I guess the kind of pithy takeaway of this is see the digital world as a part of the world. And so this happened with Tula, as I've said, and with Nancy, people I've been in email contact with for a very long time, but people I've finally got to meet in person. And it's a great coming together of these two parts of life. So often we think of social media and digital noise as a kind of bad influence on modern society, or it's, ruining people's relationships and all of this sort of stuff. And yes, there are elements of that. But it has shrunk the world and made amazing things possible as well when we allow that to be the case. It's allowed us to create bonds of people elsewhere around the globe, to share ideas, to support one another in ways that have literally never been possible before. And it's opened up the potential for me to be invited to spend the weekend talking about high sensitivity and creativity with 100 people in Finland. Wow. I mean, how amazing is that? And so the lesson is, take advantage not just of being able to interact with people online and through digital means, but use it as one part of your comprehensive web of human experience and interaction. Use it as a bridge to physical connection, to, meeting people, to being involved in communities that stretch beyond the online world. I guess it's kind of encouraged me to stop talking about the online world versus the real world, and to remind myself that, hey, the online world is the real world. It's just one part of it. It's one beautiful aspect of it, of this big tapestry of what it means to be alive. And I can make what I want of it. Sure, it has some pretty grim parts and some people use it in pretty vile ways, but that's the same with anything. Anything that you can think of is going to be used in pretty grim ways by some people who choose to just, turn things grim. But that's our choice. And it's up to us to use it in a better, more loving, more connective way, where we're putting positive change and positive encouragements and support and relationship building at the heart of things. And it's our choice how we respond to the negative stuff as well. In my new course that I published last week, beginning of this week, the Sensitive Stoic, I talked about it in the last episode. I speak about these moments where we face these times where we choose how we're going to react to things going on around us. And if we choose to react to hostility with hostility, we feed the monster. Or we can initiate something a whole lot better. We can be creative rather than just consumers of the world. And the choice is ours. It's a lot easier said than done, obviously, but the choice is ultimately ours. And we can turn and change the world for the better if we embrace that choice to initiate. If you want to learn more about the course, then just go to andymort.com/sensitive stoic. Yeah. Okay, the final lesson. 7th and final thing. Well, I mean, that I'm going to talk about on this. That I think I learned a lot more than 7 things. But it's you will never know the true extent of your influence. And so we are role models, whether we realize it or not. One of the most memorable moments for me was after I finished performing in the evening. I was selling CDs, and a young man came up to me and said that he'd been in tears watching me watching me perform my music. He writes songs, he played the piano, and wanted to perform in front of people himself, but had experienced anxiety around it. He couldn't get himself to sort of make that step to do it. And he said that listening to what I'd said earlier in the day and then watching me play had made him realize that maybe he could do it. And he went on to say that he and others in similar positions need role models like me to show them what is possible. Now, I don't say this to toot my own horn. I don't say it to be like, yeah, people need role models like me. Not by any stretch, but rather to make the point that it really took me aback. It was really humbling to hear what he said. To have somebody tell you that you're a role model, or you have been a role model, or something you've done has modeled something to them. It's a really precious thing because it's actually being communicated as well. Most of the time, you know, when we're kind of influencing people who will never tell us that we've played a part in their development. So even that, just to know that that has happened is a really special thing. You know, think about all those you've looked to as role models in your life. How many of you actually told that to, admitted it to? Maybe 1 or 2 if you've had the opportunity. But it really struck me that people take notice of what we do. And we have in our hands the potential to lead the world in positive ways by setting an example of what we would love to see the world look like, of what we would love to help, you know, bring out of other people and help people bring out of themselves and add as value to the world around them. I mean, geez, a highly sensitive songwriter who finds the courage to share his music with the world. What a gift. If me getting up on stage and playing songs means that someone is going to look at that and think, well, maybe I could do that too. And so they then add something of immeasurable value to the world because of that interaction. Then that makes it so worth doing. I left Finland feeling really built up, really fueled by creative energy, by love, really, the people, the place, the experience. It was such a privilege to be invited and such an honor to take part in the happening. It's a weekend I will not forget, and I hope that I've been able to convey some of, I guess, my love for what went on, my appreciation for what went on in this episode, but also to kind of mine the experience for value that might help you as well if you're listening to this. You know, it's always a balancing act to kind of talk about stuff like this without being too self-indulgent, to be like, I'm going to tell you stories about what's happened to me, these amazing things that I've been doing. You know, like, that's, as far as I'm concerned, when I hear people doing that, it's like, well, okay, great, but like, what's the deeper meaning? And I hope wholeheartedly that this has not been that, and that there are things that I've shared that hopefully you can use and apply in your own life as well. So that's my hope. I don't know if I've done it, but yeah. That's kind of my reflection on Finland. Thank you so much for listening today. I'd love to ask you a massive favour just before we go. The best thing that you can do to support the podcast, other than becoming a patron through Patreon, is to rate and comment on the show in your chosen podcast application, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google, wherever you listen to podcasts. If you just take a minute to find the Gentle Rebel podcast there, to leave a quick 5-star rating and a little review if you have a second moment, that'd be absolutely amazing. It really does help to kind of get this show and previous episodes of it into more of the ears of people searching for help and support with these topics that we explore each week. I'd be really, really grateful if you could do that. It'd be amazing. Right, and just to let you know, I have recorded this, I've filmed this episode, so I'll be sharing it on YouTube as well again. I did it for a little while back, but it became a little bit too overwhelming in terms of the workload that it took. I am descending into darkness as I record this, so if you are watching this on YouTube, you've probably seen me go from the light into the dark. That's not a metaphor for anything other than the fact that night is on its way, and so is the autumn. Okay, I'll be back again next week with another episode of the Gentle Rebel podcast. Until then, do remember that you are an artist, that the world needs your art. Now go and make somebody's day. Goodbye.
Angels in disguise, we can be